Hello everyone. Today I'm going to explain how we are going to create CRUD example like create, update, delete, read, those kind of operations using Spring Boot and as a database we are going to use the PostgreSQL. As you know, we can easily use MySQL, MongoDB and H2 database in most of the cases. Even also I have created some CRUD operations using those with those databases. But now today I'm going to explain how we are going to create the CRUD examples kind of thing using the Spring Boot and the PostgreSQL. So as a content like what I'm going to cover today's in this tutorial. So first of all, as we're going to some kind of create operations, CRUD operations, we need to implement a kind of REST APIs and using the Spring Boot obviously, and with JPA and Hibernate tool we are going to use, and as a database we are going to use the PostgreSQL database. We will use the latest version of all those things. And before starting the development, basically we need to making sure that we need to install all the related softwares and all the things into our local machines like PostgreSQL, then Java, and all those things should be installed into our local machine, so then we can start our development. How we are going to install and what are the steps for installing the PostgreSQL into our local system. So I will provide the links into the description section so that you guys can understand and you guys can follow some steps from there. So it's a kind of very easy. It's there is no complexities over there. So first of all, as uh, here basically also I will show you like how we are going to create the Spring Boot applications and then just kind of skeleton application and how we are going to import those things. And next, like here basically we are going to create the 3 or 4 REST APIs. One is for get users, another one for the post, like save the data for the user, then fetching the data for all the user or maybe by ID, and then delete the user. So those kind of things we are going to use over here. So I will gradually I will explain all the things in later phase when I will going to the development phase. As a tool and technologies, we are going to use the Spring Boot, and as we are going to Spring Boot the latest version, so obviously the minimum version of the Java, it's Java 17 we are going to use. And then Spring Data JPA, as we are going to the Hibernate tool. And as a dependency management tool we are going to use the Maven. As a IDE, either Eclipse or STS, Spring Tool Suite or IntelliJ, uh, any kind of tools that you guys can use. So there is a no use. And as a database, PostgreSQL we are using. Okay. So first of all, we are going to create one Spring Boot applications from the Spring Boot site, like starter the initializer site. Then we will put some Maven dependencies over there for doing the development and fetching the and use some kind of the functionalities for related like jars. And then we'll configure the PostgreSQL database, like how we are going to connect with the PostgreSQL database and all those things. As you know, we will create some entities. Means first of all we need to create some schemas into the PostgreSQL, and then over there we need to create some kind of tables like user, and user having some kind of information like name, password, address, and all those things. Accordingly, also we need to create some entities or mapping from the database to the into our application. So also we need to create some entities over there. Then we can create some repositories so that we can connect with the database. And obviously if any need kind of, then we can create some service layer for writing the logic some over there. And then finally we can create the controller so that we can communicate with the service and service to the repository. And then finally we can test our application using the Postman. So this is the basically kind of that I'm going to create in this in this tutorial. Hope you guys can understand, it's a very easy, it's not complex thing. So without further delay, let's get started. So for creating the project, actually Spring Boot project, as I was mentioned earlier, we can create the Spring Boot project easily from this the starter. This is the one site that Spring provided. Over there we can choose the dependencies, kind of from here we can choose whatever we need, whatever the project we want to create. that first of all we need to decide, like either it will be Gradle or maybe Maven or maybe Gradle, Kotlin, Groovy. Obviously Groovy is a language, so either language, Java, Kotlin or Groovy. Out of these three we can choose. So over here I am choosing this Maven and then Java, and the Spring Boot version 3.2.2. As I am going to use this 3.2.2, so for this basically what we need to check, like minimum Java version should be like 17. Okay, else it will, we are not able to create the project for this one. So that also like we need to create first. Okay, so let create the project. So here basically we can choose the group. So let me, okay, then like as an artifact we need to choose the things, and project name and description. So it's a kind of what you can say, it's a CRUD example. Okay, demo project for Spring Boot PostgreSQL. Okay, and then we can dot CRUD. Okay, so you need the jar, and then Java like version is the 17. Here in the right side, from here we can choose the dependencies like Spring Web. So as you can see from over here, either for like creating the web applications like RESTful APIs, application using Spring MVC, and also with that it's having the Apache Tomcat as the default embedded container. So we need to choose this one. Next, like as we are going to use the data JPA, so for this Spring data JPA, these dependencies we need to add. Like it's for persisting data into the SQL store with the Java persistence API using the Spring Data and Hibernate. Okay. Next, as we are going to use the PostgreSQL driver, so that's a PostgreSQL. So for that we need to use this PostgreSQL driver. As you can, it's written over here the description, like as a JDBC or R2DBC driver that allows Java programmers to connect a PostgreSQL connect database using standard database independent Java code. So we need to use this PostgreSQL driver. Next, we are going to use the Lombok. So what is the purpose of this Lombok? Lombok basically is used to reduce the writing the boilerplate code. Suppose we have write one DTO, for example, user, and user having the like name, address, password, email, all those things. So previously actually we need to create the getter and setter for all the fields. So instead of creating the getter and setter, if we are going to use the Lombok, then there is an annotation I will show you over here in the project, like at that getter and at that setter, if we mention it the class level, then automatically we don't need to write the like uh, we don't need to write manually at the getter and setter. It will automatically taken care. So that's why you need to use this Lombok dependencies. Next is to Spring Boot Dev Tools. It will basically use to like kind of if we are having one in a project working on one applications, and then certainly it's already started in 880 port or maybe any other port, and in the meantime if we update some code, the without restart the application like start and stop, it will automatically reload all the things in the backend. Okay, so for that basically Spring Boot DevTools is used. So I'm using, you guys can use or not use, that is depends on you, but it's not needed, not mandatory one. Okay, so once we have like choose these dependencies over here, then if we clicked on the generate, so it will like generate all the things for us. Now it's generated the like uh, it's generated the project over here, as you can see over here. So you can like extract the things here. So once we extract the things, then we can like uh, import this project into our Eclipse. Okay, so how we are going to import, like import and then existing, not this one Maven, we need to choose the Maven, then existing Maven project. Okay, this one. Okay, let's finish it so that it will import it. As you can see, it's imported over here, CRUD example, right? So it will take some time, like if we can see the progress over here, can It's importing the Maven project. Yeah, so it will generate all the things, right? If we see the pom.xml file, so over here you can see like the Spring Boot version is 3.2.2, and then all the things, Java version is 17, data JPA, starter web, dev tools, PostgreSQL, Lombok, starter test. So all the dependencies they have added, and it will actually, the application is ready. We can start the application and it will start it into the default port. Okay, currently in the application properties, currently there is a no nothing is over here. We need to add for connecting with the database. So this is the overall thing, like for how we are going to create the project for this one. Next, basically, and also like explain the Maven dependencies. Next, we will configure the PostgreSQL database, right? So how we are going to define the PostgreSQL database? So once we install the PostgreSQL into our uh, like Postgres install our local machines. So after that, if you open the PG admin, then it will be look like something this. Okay. So there is one default like schemas over here, like this one, and then we need to either we can create the tables over here, or maybe we can create another database over here, and then accordingly we can create the tables over here. So I have just added the data over here, like create table, then ID, username, email, password, and primary key is the ID. Okay, so the table is created, and if I select from over here, then we can see there is a node data over here. Okay, so now we need to configure Spring Boot, our Spring Boot application, to use the PostgreSQL into our data source. So that we need to adding some properties related to the PostgreSQL. So let's add those properties over here. So what are the properties? Like Spring dot data source dot URL equals to JDBC colon. So as we are using the PostgreSQL, so that's why we need to write the PostgreSQL colon localhost, and PostgreSQL actually running into the 5432 port. Okay, we can change it, and here we are using the schema Postgre. We can choose from over here, like this one, Postgres. Okay, Postgres. So the URL define is done. Next, Spring dot data source dot username. So the username is Postgres. Next, we need to define the password for it. Username, then password. Password is password. It can be different in your case. And if we want to show the SQL, like once we are saving data into the database, then do we need to show the like SQL into the console? So for that we need to use some properties over here, like spring dot jpa dot show SQL equals to either true. If we set as true, then we can like say it will pin the console, it will pin the SQL into the console. This is the dialect, as we are using the PostgreSQL, so that's why we need to use the Postgre dialect. If we are going to use the MySQL, then we need to use the MySQL dialect over here. So this is the properties that basically we have defined over here. So once we have like, these are obviously into like how you are setting your username password. So those will be, these are the different based on your things, and also you need to change the schema if it is different for you. Next, like so for this user table, actually we are having, these are the fields. So next basically we are going to create this entity over here. So let me create one package here first, dot entity. Okay, like user. Okay, so as it is, it will be represent as an entity, so we need to annotate this annotate this class as entity. And what table basically it is referring, so that's why table is annotation. So the table name is user underscore details. So here basically we need to provide the name. So name is an attribute, and here we need to define the name user underscore details. Okay, now here basically we are going to define all the fields like private, int, id, then private username, email, private string username, private string email, private string password. Okay, these are the things that we can define over here: username, email, password, and id. Okay, now as this id will be represented as a like primary key, so for that we need to define as a id. Okay, and we need to define the, like, as the getter setter is not generated, so we need to use this lombok over here, getter and then setter. Okay, so either we can use the column name here just to represent the username, email, password, as the field name, like this username, the field name, those are same. So that's why we don't need to use the column annotation over here. If these are defined with the databases, for example, instead of username, if we user underscore name, then we need to define column, and then we are providing the name as a column user underscore name. Okay, but for now it is not required. So that means entity creation is done now. Next, what we are going to do, we are going to create the one repository so that we can communicate with the database. Right, let's create the repository one. Let's create another package over here for creating the repository. So let me create this package dot repository, and here we need to create one interface basically for user repository for behaving as user repository. And here basically we need to implement JPA repository over here so that it will be behave like this one, implements. Okay, extends actually extends JPA repository, and here we need to define the user, and then ID will be a integer. Okay, so this is done now. Either we can annotate it with repository annotations, or it will be behaving like without anything, it will behave same. So now this repository creation is done now. Next actually we are going to create like either controller or maybe either the service layer. uh, both creation is fine. So first of all, let me create one service layer over here. So let me create one package first, dot service, and then we can create one class over here like user service, and this particular class should be annotated with service annotation. Okay, so here basically what are the functions we are going to build over here. One is uh, for saving the data into the database. So for that, what we can, like, we need to create one method which will do this one. So let me create one method for this one, public, then void, and then public void save user, and it will take this user as an input, this entity user. Okay, so here obviously we need to annotate use this auto at the repository so that we can use the functionalities from there. Private user repository. Okay, now user repository dot save user. Okay, we can use the return. Okay, So this saved is done now. Next, what we are going to do over here, we can find by IDs, like user. Once we save the user, then we can find by ID. So here basically you will use the ID like int ID, and here instead of the save there is another function find by ID, and here basically we need to use this ID, and it will be obviously return the either we can do this, or like we can assign with user if user dot is empty, then we can say return empty user, like new user, empty user. Okay, else user dot get this one, else we don't need to write over here, it will be written. I think it's clear. Like if we find out this with this ID, then we can say user is there. If it is empty, so either we can directly return this one, or instead of that, what we can throw some runtime exception. Throw new runtime exception with message like user not found. Okay, so what we did, if it is like empty, if it is empty like user, if it is user is not available, then it will throw this runtime exception. Instead of runtime exception, what else we can do, we can create our own custom exception, and then accordingly we can throw from over here. If user is available, then we can just return the particular user, and then we can another method we can create over here, like find all user. Okay, so for that we don't need any user, right? What we can do over here, we can find all. Okay, it will return, we can directly return from over here. Okay, and it will be, instead of user, it will be a list of user, because it will return all the user from the database. So that's why it will be, instead of single user, it will be a list of user. So next, so that means saved user is done, find is done. Next, basically what we're going to do, we are going to update the user details into the database. So for that, it will be again a put request, it will be a post request, it will be a get request, it will be again a get request, and it will be a put request, because it will update some data. So that's why it will be a put request, means whenever you're going to create any controller over here and calling this method, this will be a put request. Okay, so here, so first of all, what we can do, we can find by this one, find by this ID. Here it will become the ID, actually user is also fine, user, and then we can find by ID user dot get db user get ID. Okay, now if db user is empty, means data is not found, then we can say user is not found. Else what we can do, dot, we can update the data, right? Means uh, we can whatever the data we can get from over here, db user dot get, so it will return the user db existing user. Okay, now here basically we can set all the details, what data actually basically coming from over here. Set, like only we are updating the username. Okay, and that name we will take from the input. Okay, and then finally we can update this one, update the data from over here. Okay, so update is also done now, and the last operation is for deleting the data. So for deleting the data we can use the delete operations. Let me copy this one, and instead of update we can mention as delete user. Okay, so find by ID, obviously we need to like find, first of all we need to find. If it is empty, means user is not available into the database, then you can throw this runtime exception. If it is not available, then what else we can do here? Basically, instead of save, there is one function like delete. Okay, so here we can put the delete and the existing user. Okay, and it's a void one, so it will doesn't return anything, so it will be a void. We can directly use this one, we can delete this. Okay, so what we have written over here in the service layer, we have like saved the user using this repository dot save function. Then find by ID, so a repository already find, there is a, these are the existing method actually, save, find by ID, find all, and then delete. These are actually existing method that we have used for finding by ID, for find all. For updating the user, what we did, first we search by the ID. If ID, this particular user is available, is exist into our database, then we are updating the data, else we are throwing the runtime exception. Similar for the delete also, like if the data is available in the, means user is exist into the database, then we are like fetching the data from the database, and then if it is not available, then we're throwing the runtime exception, else we are deleting the data from the database. So next, actually basically we can create the controller layer, and from there we can like we will communicate through this. Okay, we will call the service layer, and then accordingly we can fetch the data from the database. Okay, so let's create the controller. Let me create another package over here for creating the controller, like dot controller, and we can create one class over here like user controller. As it will be a REST APIs, we can create multiple REST APIs. So there is one annotation in Spring Boot which is REST controller. For path definition, like what will be the path? So for that, there is a one annotation which is called the request mapping. And here basically we can define the path for this one, like how it will be, means after the base URL like localhost and then port, after that the URL. So here will be, we can put the API. So here first of all we can create means we first of all we need to like inject our service layer, like user service we need to inject, because all the methods whatever you have defined, all the methods are defined over here. So first of all we need to create one API which will save the data into the database. So for example, save, and for taking the request from the any postman, or maybe if we are going to integrate this particular API with the Angular, so obviously for taking the input there is one, as it is a post request, so obviously the request will be come into the inner body. So that's why there is a one annotation is called the request body. This annotation basically we are going to use, and we are going to use this user. Then we are going to call this user service dot save user. Okay, so this is the, like it will save the data, and what can we do over here? We can directly return from over here, so that it will return the saved data, and it will be a, instead of void it will be a this means user. And as it is a post mapping, so here it will be a post mapping annotation we need to provide over here, and we can also provide the path over here like save. Okay, so what it will do means the path will be localhost 8080/API/save, and then in a body we need to pass this as a request so that it will save the data into the database. Next, we can like create another method which will fetch all the user from the database. So like it will be a get mapping, obviously. So get mapping annotation is there, and here the path will be find all. Okay, so public, it will return list of user, then find all. We don't need any parameter over here. So what basically we need to import this list, user service dot find all, and we need to return from over here. Okay, so this will be the like find all user. Next, we can like uh, another get APIs which will find by ID. So for that also we can use the get mapping, and the path will be slash, we need to mention the slash over here, find by ID. Okay, public, so it will, as we are search using the only ID, so instead of list it will return only the user, find by ID. And here basically it will take one parameter as ID. So here the request param is the attribute or annotation that basically going to use, and it will be a ID. Okay, and then return user service dot find by ID. Okay, okay, so this is now done. Here one thing we can do instead of another one is the update employee. So update employee, as we are updating something over here, so that's why it will be a put mapping. Okay, this one, and here we can use the path like update by ID. Okay, not ID basically, actually update, and we also need to pass the user detail over here. So update, and then public. In case of update, we can directly return the updated user from over here, and here we can mention as update, and here it will be taking as a body as input request body, and also we need to take the input as user. Okay, and then user service dot update user. Okay, we can return from over here. And next we can do the delete operations. So for that, if we are going to do some kind of the delete operations, for the delete mapping is there, delete mapping, and the path will be delete by ID, or you can delete slash delete by ID. Okay, public void delete, and it will be a request param int ID, user service dot delete by delete user, and here basically we need to pass this ID. Let me see. Okay, instead of that we can int ID. Okay, so these are the API basically that we are going to create over here. Let me just summarize things. First of all, we have created one save API which will basically save the data into the database. So for that we have annotated this particular API with the post mapping, and in means whatever the data we are taking, request we are taking for this saving the data like user information, so that will be coming into the like as a body. So for that we will take this, use this annotation request body, and once we will get this request, and then using this service we are calling this saved user, so that it will save the data into the database using the repository. If we go over here using the repository, we are going to save the data over here. Next, if we are going to use the find all, so as it is a get request get mapping, so that's why we have annotated with the get mapping, and here we have provided the path, and inside of this method we have used this user service dot find all. It will fetch all the user from the database. In the next one we have used the find by id. Obviously in a request parameter the id will come, and based on this id we will find the data. If the data is available, data is exist into the database, then it will return the data, else it will throw the runtime exception, right? As you can see over here, if data is not available, then it will throw the runtime exception. Okay, next for update also we are taking the data as a in a request body, like in a user, and then we are going to update the user, and similar for the delete id. So for updating, one more point I want to mention over here, for as we are going to update the data here, so that's why we're going to use the put mapping, and for delete we are going to use the delete mapping. So these are the things, or these are the API list that I have mentioned over here, and that basically kind of support the CRUD operation kind of thing. And next, basically what we can do, we can start the application and we can like check from the Postman. We'll check for all the APIs, like how it is working and how we are going to call this API from the Postman, what will be the path, and how we are going to pass the data into the body, and after updating also how it will look like. So let's start this application and test from the Postman. Let me start our application. So for starting the applications, so we need to select this main class, and then from over here as Java application we need to start. So as we know, Spring Boot already having the embedded Tomcat, so it will start into the embedded Tomcat server. So that's why we don't need to maintain any external server just for testing. It's taking port into the 8080. It started now. As you can see over here, it's taking this PostgreSQL dialect, and the application's Tomcat started on 8080 port. Okay, so now we can test from the Postman. So for first of all we need to check, like as any data, like if we check from this table, like user details table, as there is a no data, so first of all we need to insert some record over here. So for that we need to call our this service, save service. Okay, so as it is a post mapping, so we need to define here post mapping, and the path will be localhost 8080 slash API slash save. Now let me map this one, this API, and then save. So in a body we need to pass this request, right? So here we need to select, as it is a non-selection, so instead of that we need to select the raw, and over here we need to select the JSON, because the request will be in a JSON we need to pass. So here we need to, first of all we need to define the ID. For example, ID is 1, then username, for example username is test, then password is test, then what else we have to keep over here, username, email, and password, and email test @email.com. Okay, so now I have prepared the request over here in the body. Now if we click the save button, then it should be saved into the, if everything is fine, then it should be saved data into the database. We are getting the 200. Let me check the console. So here you can also see, like it's select the data from the this one, and then insert data into the user detail table, right? So this SQL also printed over here in the console. So now let me select the data again. We can get the data over here, right? Now if we insert another record over here, test1, it's inserted. Let me select the data over here. Yeah, 2 records over here, right? So that means data inserted successfully. Now there is another API that we are going to check in a controller. Like first of all, we will call this find all. So let me create, as you know, find all is a like get API. So localhost, and the path would be localhost API then find all. So if we select this one, then we can get all the data, right? To, as you know, like we have inserted two records, so here we can get the two records over here as we are calling the find all. Now there is another API which is find by ID. Now if we call this one, then is a request param, we need to pass this ID. So what would be the ID value? The ID would be value, ID is the 1 or 2. In a console you can get the details, right? That select one we are getting. Okay, now instead of this we can use this find by ID, and in a param basically we need to pass this parameter ID equals to 1. Okay, now if we give this, so it will return only the single record over here, and also we're getting the 200, right? Now let me clean this console first. Now if we pass this 2, so it will return the user which is having this ID 2. Now if we check the console, it's a select statement is here, and based on this ID it will fetch the data from the database. Now suppose there is a one record which is doesn't exist, for example 4, but 4 the ID is not available into the database, only 1 and 2 is available. So in this scenario we are expecting some runtime exception, right? It will give us the internal server here, and that means we'll get this exception. It is a runtime exception, and the message is user not found. This is this particular message given by us, right? Because here if you see the code, user not found, this one the user message, and we are throwing the runtime message. That means code is working fine as expected. So next, so that means find and find by ID is done. Now next basically we can create another API which basically update the data into the database, right? So for that we are going to create the put mapping, put request, right? So here it will be a put, path will be localhost 880 slash API slash, path will be update slash update. Okay, now we can take the body request from over here. For example, we are going to update this. We need to select this raw, and for example, instead of test1 we are going to update this as test update, right? So now let click the send. We are getting the 200. Now check the database. Previously it's a test1. Now if we select one, it's a test update. So it will, that means update is done now. Now suppose if we want to update this record too, so for that also we need to create another API which will basically mapping is the delete, right? And here localhost colon 8080 slash API slash delete, and we are going to delete by ID. So as a request param we need to pass this ID 2. So for this, if we want to delete this record, particular record, so the ID is 2, right? So if we pass this one, we are getting not found. Okay, delete is not over here, so let me delete by ID. Okay, so we need to, instead of delete, it will be delete by ID. It's a void, but we are getting 200. That means it's deleted successfully. Now if we again hit this particular select statement, then you can see the 2 record, that means the ID, the details with the 2 ID is deleted now. So in this way basically we can perform all the operations like saving the data, fetching the data, and then like find all, find by ID, update the data, how we are going to use this mapping, get, put, post, and then like these are all the APIs how we are going to use. So these are the pretty much details about this, how we are going to use this CRUD operations kind of thing using a Spring Boot and the PostgreSQL, how we are going to communicate with those things, all the details, how, what are the properties we need to define over here. So this is about this how we are going to communicate with the like Spring Boot and the Postgres API. So here I think you guys can understand like how we are going to build this CRUD REST APIs using this Spring Boot, JPA, Hibernate, and the PostgreSQL database. And as you know, we have used all the latest version over here. If you guys have anything, please do let me know in the comment sections. I will put this code into the Git and share the link into the description section. Also, I will put the SQL schemas for this one so that you guys can create the details over there. And also, I will put this code into the Git. So check out the code. Don't forget to subscribe my channel. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.